first sign was the smell. Ranger Tomas Brenner noticed it on a Tuesday, 3 days before the festival of first harvest drew 40,000 people to the valley floor. It came off the Tegern Sea at dawn, not the clean algae and cold water smell he'd known since boyhood, but something resinous and sharp and deeply wrong, like pine sap cut with something chemical, like a greenhouse left to rot. He stood on the dock behind his station house and breathed it in and felt a cold wire of unease run from the back of his nose to the base of his skull. He told himself it was a thermal inversion. The lake did strange things in autumn. He did not tell himself that a second time. By the second morning, the smell was stronger, and the birds had stopped. Not fled, stopped. The finches and thrushes that filled the shoreline pines every morning were simply sitting, motionless, heads tilted, at an angle Tomas had never seen on a living bird, like they were listening to something pitched just below human hearing. A kite he'd been watching for 2 seasons sat on a fence post at the edge of his property and stared at the water for 6 hours without blinking. On the third morning, the water changed color. Not dramatically, not the sudden lurid bloom of an algae event. It was subtler, a deepening of the green towards something almost bioluminescent, visible only in the pre-dawn dark, when the lake surface caught no light from above. Standing on his dock at 4 in the morning, Tomas could see it, a faint pulse, deep in the water, slow, rhythmic, like breathing. He went inside and pulled the old book from the shelf. His grandfather had given it to him, handwritten, bound in something that might have been leather and might have been something else. Hunter's records going back 6 generations. His grandfather had added his own section in the back, cramped and urgent, written in the dialect of a man who'd seen something and needed to be precise about it. Tomas had read it twice as a teenager and dismissed it. He read it again now at the kitchen table with his coffee going cold. The last entry was dated 1962. His grandfather had written, "The water turned this same color the night before it moved. Do not go near the lake before sunrise. Do not shine a light on the water. If it has already woken, and God help you if it has, there is only one way, the old way. The way my father's father wrote down, which I did not believe until I saw it. You will find it in the pages marked with red thread." Tomas found the red thread. He read those pages 3 times. Then he made a call. The vehicle that arrived at his gate the next morning was not what he'd expected. He'd called the Regional Wildlife Emergency line, which he'd expected to route to some sleepy desk in Munich. Instead, a woman climbed out of a rented SUV and offered her hand with the brisk efficiency of someone who'd been on a plane for 14 hours and had not wasted the time sleeping. "To Haruko Nakamura," she said, "you reported anomalous bioluminescent activity in the lake basin with associated fauna behavior suppression." "I reported that the Tegern Sea smells wrong and the birds have gone strange," Tomas said. "That's what I said." She looked past him at the water. Expression did not change, but something shifted behind her eyes. "How long since the color change?" "Since this morning. It's visible in daylight." She was already walking toward the dock. He followed. "You've seen this before." "I've seen the precursor pattern before, 3 times, twice in the Pacific Basin, once in northern Hokkaido." She crouched at the dock's edge and held a device over the water. Something the size of a phone but bristling with sensors he didn't recognize. "First 2 times I didn't arrive in time. The Hokkaido event was contained. Barely." "Contained how?" She looked at him over her shoulder. "The local method, which you apparently already know. Or you wouldn't have called a number that doesn't appear in any public directory." That stopped him. "How did you know I used that number?" "Because that number connects to a notification system that has existed, in various forms, since 1887. When it receives a call from a geographic coordinate flagged in the registry, which this lake has been for 6 generations, it routes to me." She stood. "To whoever holds my position. Before me it was a man named Obata. Before him, a woman named Gruber, actually. This valley, your grandfather knew her." Tomas said nothing for a moment. The lake pulsed slow green in the morning light. "What is it?" he finally asked. "Really," Haruko pocketed her sensor. "Before I answer that, I need to know something. Your family's record, the old method, do you understand it? Not just the steps, the reasoning behind it." "I think so. Because what we're dealing with is not a natural phenomenon. It never was. The entity, in this lake is very old, and it is very large. And the reason it's been dormant for 60 years is that something has been broadcasting a suppression signal at it. That signal has been interrupted. And I think I know why, she pointed. Above the far tree line, barely visible against the pale autumn sky, something caught the light. Not a plane. Not a drone. The geometry was wrong. Too smooth, too regular, a silver oval hanging motionless at an altitude that should have put it in the flight path of every commercial carrier crossing this part of Europe. They came from the Ganja system, she said with the matter-of-fact tone of someone giving a weather report. 11 light-years out, K-type star. Agricultural civilization. They've been surveying Earth for arable land for about 30 years, specifically looking for a location with the right soil composition, the right UV exposure, and sufficient flat land. She paused. They want the festival grounds. The Wiesen. Yes. They want to plant crops on the Wiesen. Cannabis, specifically. Primary food crop. Caloric content equivalent to our grain. The Teresian visa meets every criterion. She looked at him steadily. Problem is, they didn't research the local ecology carefully enough. They woke the lake because they thought it would clear the land. They didn't know it can't be controlled once it wakes, and now they're sitting up there in their ship trying to redirect it. And it is ignoring them completely. And it is going to reach the valley in approximately 22 hours. Tomas was quiet for a long time. 22 hours, he said, give or take. He looked at the book in his hands, then at the lake, then at the silver shape above the tree line. My grandfather's record says we need 3 things, he said. The sound, the scent, and the woman. I know. You're the woman. I've done it before. Her mouth curved, just slightly. I told you about Hokkaido. The sound was the hard part. His grandfather had been precise about this. Not a recording, not a synthesized approximation. The creature in the lake responded to resonant frequency, produced by a specific instrument, a set of horns that had hung in the hunting lodge outside Kruth since before his great-great-grandfather was born. 7 horns of varying lengths, hung in descending order, tuned to something that wasn't quite any Western scale. When Tomas had asked his grandfather about them as a boy, the old man had said, "Those are not for music." For apology, he drove to Kruth at speed. The lodge was locked, but the emergency key was where it had always been, under the 3rd flagstone left of the door. The horns were where they had always been. He loaded them carefully and drove back. Haruko had spent the time working. She had a portable field kit deployed on the dock, sensors arrayed in a semicircle facing the water, a series of chemical compounds he didn't ask about, and a shortwave transceiver that she told him was not transmitting to Munich. Talking to them, he said. The ship, trying to. They don't speak any Earth language, but they understand the concept of negotiation. They've been attempting to redirect the entity for 18 hours, and it's no longer responding to their signal at all. Frightened. She paused. They're also hungry. Their food supply ran out during the crossing. It's a long way from the Ganja system. Tomas set the horns down. Are you serious? Agricultural civilization. They aren't warriors. They're farmers who got desperate. The planet dried out. Climate event. Orbital shift. I don't have the full picture. They've been watching Earth for 30 years, but this was their first landing. They made a mistake. She turned to look at him. They made a very large mistake, and now 40,000 people are going to be in the valley tomorrow morning. And there is something the size of an apartment building asleep under that lake, and in 14 hours, it's going to stop being asleep. Can we just ask them to put it back to sleep? Store the suppression signal? Their transmitter was damaged during the landing. It was the suppression signal hardware they damaged. That's why it woke. He sat down on the dock. In the water below him, very deep, something moved, not dramatically. Just a slow displacement of pressure, like the lake itself had shifted its weight. All right, he said. Walk me through the steps again, she told him. He listened. When she was done, he picked up the first horn and felt its weight. The coldness of the old brass, the faint wear on the mouthpiece, where 6 generations of hands had held it. My grandfather said the creature remembers, Tomas told her. That's why this works. It remembers the sound. The valley people made it a deal, a long time ago. Long enough that it's in the blood now, in the cellular memory of the thing. They agreed to leave it alone, and it agreed to leave them alone, and the horns are how you remind it. And the scent? Haruko asked. He held up a small bottle from his pack. Dark glass, old wax seal, the label written in his grandmother's handwriting. Rendered pine resin, lake water, and something I can't identify that my grandmother called Fried Harzol, peace resin oil. She made it fresh every 7 years. This is the last batch she prepared. Haruko was quiet. Then, your family has been maintaining this for generations. Someone had to. Most families forgot. Mine didn't. She studied him for a moment with an expression he couldn't read. Then she nodded once. The way she nodded at information that confirmed a hypothesis. And the last component. You stand at the water. You have to be willing to let it see you. Not with light, it doesn't see the way we do. It senses mass, heat, intent. He met her eyes. Juice. My grandfather wrote that it can tell the difference between someone standing there because they have to, and someone standing there because they choose to. It won't respond to the first kind. I'm not there because I have to be, Haruko said. I know, Tomas said. That's why I didn't argue when you said you'd done it before. They waited until full dark. Above the tree line, the silver ship hadn't moved. Tomas had watched it all afternoon, half expecting a military response. Helicopters, someone with authority telling him to evacuate. None came. The valley was quiet. In the town below, festival lights were going up. He could hear the distant sound of a brass band rehearsing. At 9 in the evening, his radio crackled. It was the festival director, a man named Gregor who Tomas had known for 15 years. Tomas, we've got a weird report coming in from the southern lakeside. Some kind of seismic activity, and there's a thing in the sky that the weather service says isn't theirs. I know about both, Tomas said. Keep the setup going. Don't evacuate. You know about, what do you mean you know, Gregor? Have I ever given you bad information? A pause, no. Keep the lights on, keep the band playing. I need the valley to sound like itself tonight. Can you do that? Another pause. Longer. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He clicked off. Haruko looked at him. You need the valley to sound like itself? My grandfather wrote that the creature is partly oriented by sound, Tomas said. The festival has been in that valley for 200 years. The creature has been asleep beneath this lake for 60, but it was awake before. Awake when the festival was young. Awake when it was loud and chaotic, and full of exactly this kind of noise. The sound is part of the deal, part of what it agreed to sleep through. He looked at the lights far below. If the valley sounds like itself, the deal holds. The creature remembers. Haruko was quiet for a moment. That's not in any xenobiology manual I've ever read. No, Tomas said. It's in my grandfather's book. At 11:17, the lake moved. Not dramatically, even then. The water simply rose, 2-3 centimeters, across the entire surface simultaneously, as though something very large had lifted its chest to breathe. The bioluminescence sharpened from a slow pulse to a hard, steady glow. The air temperature dropped 4 degrees. In the trees behind them, every bird that had been sitting motionless, for 3 days, lifted at once and scattered into the dark. Tomas picked up the first horn. He'd practiced the sequence that afternoon. 7 notes, descending. Not music, his grandfather had been right about that. More like a phrase. Formal phrase. The kind you use when you're speaking to something old, and you want it to understand that you know the forms. The first note left the horn, and rolled across the water and kept going, impossibly, reverberating from the far shore and coming back changed, harmonically richer, as though something beneath the surface had added an undertone. Creature had heard it. He played the sequence through. Twice. The water rose another centimeter. The glow intensified. Uncapped the bottle of peace resin oil and let 3 drops fall from the dock edge into the water. The chemical hit the surface and spread in a slow circle, iridescent and dark, and the glow beneath it shifted. A new color, something between gold and amber, and then stilled. Listening, Tomas put the horn down. His hands were steady. He was surprised they were steady. Haruko stepped to the dock edge and stood there, her arms slightly away from her body, her face toward the water, forming. Not presenting, just present, the way his grandfather had written it. A person standing in the full weight of their own choosing. The lake held. For 3 minutes nothing happened. The festival music drifted up from the valley. The silver ship above the tree line burned cold in the dark sky. The water glowed amber and waited. Then very slowly it subsided. The glow deepened, the pulse slowed. Not to nothing, not yet, but to something that felt like consideration rather than emergence. The deal was being reviewed. The old memory was being consulted. Every ancestor who had stood on this dock and played these notes was, in some way, present in the record. Tomas sat down on the dock, with his legs hanging over the edge, and waited. At 1 in the morning, the ship moved. Not away, down. It descended slowly, through the tree line on the far shore, slipping through the pines without touching them, and settled on the flat ground at the water's edge. No landing lights. No engines Tomas could hear. It rested on the earth with a softness that felt apologetic. A panel opened. They came out in a group of 7, and Tomas's first thought was that they looked like they'd been traveling for a very long time. Their postures were the universal language of exhaustion. They were small, shorter than he'd expected, and they moved with a carefulness that wasn't caution so much as depletion. They were wearing something that might have been agricultural clothing, tools at their belts that looked designed for digging, for transplanting, for working soil. They stopped at the water's edge, 30 meters away. One of them looked at Haruko, then at Tomas, then at the horn in Tomas's hands. It made a sound, complex, layered, nothing like speech but unmistakably communicative. A device translated it in text on her screen, which she held so Tomas could read. "We did not know it was there. We are sorry for what we woke." Tomas looked at them for a long moment. "Tell them," he said slowly, "that an apology is a start. There's still something awake under this lake, and we need to finish the process. Tell them to be quiet. Tell them not to use any transmitters. Tell them the creature is listening to everything." Haruko spoke into her device. The translation went out. The group of 7 grew very still. "We understand, T," came the reply. "We will be still. We are good at being still." "We have been very afraid, I know," Tomas said, though he hadn't asked for a translation. He'd seen it in the way they stood. He'd recognized it. Me too. The process took until 4 in the morning. 3 more sequences on the horns. 2 more applications of the piece resin oil, standing at the water's edge twice more, once for 30 minutes, without moving at a point when the glow had surged, and Tomas had felt the dock vibrate beneath him, and had gripped the planks and not moved. The 7 visitors sat on the far shore and did not move and did not make a sound, and twice Tomas noticed one of them passing something among the group. A small container, shared in turn, the way people share something when they have very little of it, and share it anyway, because that's the kind of people they are. 3:45, the glow went out. Not dramatically, it just stopped. The water went dark. The temperature came back up. In the pines, something that sounded like a single finch tested a note, then stopped, then tried again. Tomas set down the 7th horn and let out a breath that felt like it had been compressed in his chest since Tuesday. Ko sat down beside him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "The Hokkaido event," Tomas said finally. "How long did that take?" 6 hours. This took 5. You're better at the horns than the man who helped me in Hokkaido." "I've been practicing since I was 8, Tomas said. "Grandfather made me." Haruko laughed. It was a short sound, surprised out of her, and it made her look about 10 years younger. "Mine made me learn to read sonar. I thought it was so boring." "Did it help?" "Every time." On the far shore, one of the 7 had stood and was walking carefully toward the water. It stopped at the edge, and crouched and reached into the lake with what might have been a hand, and held the water for a moment. Then it looked across at Tomas. The device translated. "It is sleeping again, we can tell. Equipment is broken, but we can tell a pause." "Then, how did you know the way to do this?" Tomas held up the book. The visitor looked at it for a long moment. "You kept a record," it said, "across many generations. You kept the knowledge even when it was not needed." "Yes," Tomas said. "We did not think humans did this." Tomas thought about his grandfather at this same dock with this same book. About his grandmother making piece resin oil in the kitchen on a winter afternoon, with a particular focused look he'd never seen on her face any other time. About 6 generations of his family maintaining a thing they couldn't fully explain to their children, because the words for it weren't really words. They were actions, sequences, presences. "We do it when it matters enough," he said. Dawn came up slow and orange over the Alps. Haruko had her device out again, in full translation mode now. conducting what looked like a very careful conversation with the group of 7. I sat on the dock and drank from a thermos and watched the lake settle back into itself. The green gone, the pulse gone, just dark water and the first cold light on its surface. The festival sounds had stopped around 2 in the morning, but at 5 he could hear the early crews arriving in the valley. Voices, engines, someone testing a PA system. The smell of wood smoke and coffee and frying sausage drifted up from below. The valley reassembling itself for another day. He thought about 40,000 people who would arrive in a few hours and who would never know how close it had been. Eat and drink and argue and laugh and cry in the particular way of a people at a festival, which was to say completely, without reservation, with total commitment to the specific joy of being in a specific place, with specific other people at a specific moment. It had nearly ended. The people from the ganja system had not meant for it to nearly end. They'd been desperate, and they'd made a mistake, and they hadn't known what they were waking. That didn't change what nearly happened, but it changed how he felt about the 7 figures on the far shore, who were now listening to Haruko, with the attentive posture of students who desperately needed the lesson to have a good answer. He walked over. Haruko looked up. They want to know if there's somewhere on Earth where their crop might grow without complications. What are the soil requirements? She asked. The device gave him numbers. He thought about it. There's a plateau in the Atacama, he said. Abandoned mining site. The UV profile is extraordinary, and the soil composition is unusual. Lots of silicates, very high mineral density. No population within 300 kilometers. No mythology as far as I know. He paused. No lakes. Haruko translated. The 7 conferred. Their response came back. The UV profile would be acceptable. The mineral density is higher than our home soil, but our crops adapt. We would need to assess in person. A pause. Would this be permitted? Tomas looked at Haruko. Above my pay grade, he said. And mine, she said. I know whose it isn't. She held up the transceiver that wasn't transmitting to Munich. Give me 20 minutes. She walked away down the shoreline. Tomas stood with the 7 visitors in the early light. Them looked at him and made a sound that the device rendered haltingly as, "You are a person who watches a place, a ranger," Tomas said. Yes. On our world, persons who watch places are, the word does not come through cleanly. They are considered to hold memory. For the land. Because land does not remember itself, so Tomas considered that. That's about right. We have few such persons left. Most of our land memory died with the drought. He didn't know what to say to that. He offered the thermos. The visitor looked at it. Looked at him, reached out. The hand was not quite a hand, but it was close enough. It took the thermos with the same careful attention he gave to the old glass bottle of peace resin oil. The attention of something knowing it was handling something that mattered. It drank, made a sound he couldn't interpret. Passed the thermos to the next one. They passed it around the way they'd passed the container during the night. All 7s, in turn, without hoarding, without rushing. Then it came back to him. Keep it, he said. You've got a long flight. Haruko came back at 6:30 with an answer that was technically a set of conditions, and technically also a yes. The conditions were a 6-month assessment period, no terraforming, no interference with the local ecosystem, full transparency with a monitoring body that Haruko apparently had the authority to constitute on the spot. The 7 visitors accepted without hesitation. Their responses came back fast and unambiguous, with a quality that Tomas recognized as relief. Going to the Atacama, Haruko said. Good. They want to know if there's anything they can do for the lake, the valley. Their suppression signal hardware is broken. I told them that. They say they can repair it before they leave. It will take. She checked the translation. About 3 hours, and they can calibrate it to the original 1962 frequency. Tomas looked at the lake, then at the book in his hands. Tell them yes, he said. And tell them, when they repair it, to aim it a little deeper than the original. My grandfather's notes say the creature settled lower in the basin since the last time. The old frequency was reaching it but barely. Haruko stared at him. How does your grandfather's book know the geometry of the suppression signal? It doesn't, Tomas said. It knows where the creature rests. And the physics of resonance in deep water isn't complicated, she translated. The visitors conferred. Their response. He is a person to a place, one of them said. The same one who had spoken to him before, he thought. We understand now what this means. By 8 in the morning, the suppression signal was back. Tomas felt it as a change in the air pressure, barely perceptible, the same way you feel a distant thunderstorm resolve. The lake went ordinary. The last traces of the green tint faded. The kite came back to the fence post, and then, apparently satisfied, flew off toward the water with purposeful wings. The silver ship lifted at 8:22. Slow, quiet, no drama. It rose above the tree line, and then above the Alps, and then it was gone, leaving the sky exactly as it had been, which was to say extremely blue and entirely itself. Tomas stood on the dock and watched it go. Haruko came to stand beside him. She had her bag over her shoulder. She was clearly going somewhere next. She was always clearly going somewhere next. The Atacama team will make contact with you, she said. For the monitoring body. You on it. I'm a ranger, not a xenobiologist. You're a person who watches a place, she said. And you kept the record. She offered her hand. He shook it. Hokkaido, he said. Will that happen again? I don't know. The lake there is quiet. Has been since, but you check every 6 months, she paused. There's a woman in the village near the lake who leaves coffee out for me. She's 83. Grandmother knew the method. He nodded. Somehow he wasn't surprised. She walked to her car. He watched it go down the road toward Munich. Then he turned back to the lake. It was a very ordinary lake in the very ordinary morning light. Dark and deep and cold and slightly green in the shadow of the pines. If you didn't know better, you'd think it was just a lake. If you didn't know better, you'd see the old dock and the hunting station beyond that and think. A quiet life, a simple life. A life of watching birds and checking water levels and walking the same path your grandfather walked. Tomas pulled out the old book and found the last blank page. He uncapped his pen. October. He wrote. The visitors from the Ganja system came and went. They woke the thing in the lake, accidentally. By damage to their suppression equipment during landing, and the old method brought it back down. 5 hours. Haruko Nakamura participated, as her counterpart did in Hokkaido. The visitors have departed for the Atacama assessment. Signal hardware repaired and recalibrated. I adjusted the targeting depth by approximately 4 meters, based on the 1987 subsidence, notes in section Sin7. He paused, at the water. I don't know if anyone will read this. I didn't know if anyone would read the parts before mine. When I was young, somebody wrote it down anyway, every time, because the knowledge doesn't keep itself. Someone has to carry it. He looked up. Far down the slope, the festival was beginning. He could hear it. That specific sound of 40,000 people settling into the fullness of a day they had every intention of enjoying completely. Beer being poured, a band warming up, children running, the sound of his valley on its best day. He wrote one more line. The deal holds. Leave them to their noise. They've earned it. He closed the book and put it back under his arm and stood on the dock in the morning light, watching the kite make long, slow circles over water that looked, now, exactly as it should. Ordinary hours kept.